The icy waters of the Snake River clawed at Hannah Miller's skirts as she struggled against the current, her heart pounding with each desperate breath. The spring flood had turned the normally manageable crossing into a death trap, and she was losing ground with every passing second. The wagon train was stranded on the far bank, and her foolish attempt to find a better ford had nearly cost her everything. "Help!" she screamed, the word barely audible over the roar of the water. Her fingers clutched at slippery rocks as the powerful current threatened to sweep her away. That's when she saw him, a tall figure on horseback, plunging into the churning water without hesitation. The stranger's duster coat billowed behind him as his horse fought the current, powerful legs propelling them toward her. Hannah couldn't believe anyone would risk their life for a woman they'd never met. "Hold on," he called, his voice deep and steady even as the water reached his saddle. He extended a weathered hand toward her, still several feet away but closing the distance. Hannah reached out, their fingertips almost touching before the current yanked her backward. "You'll drown," she cried, terrified now for them both. The cowboy's eyes, a startling blue beneath the shadow of his hat, locked with hers. "Not while you're still holding my hand," he answered, lunging forward to grasp her wrist in an iron grip. In one fluid motion, he pulled her from the water's grip and onto his horse. Hannah clung to him, shivering, as the animal fought its way back to shore. His body was warm and solid against her freezing form. Only when they reached the bank did she realize she was sobbing. Her rescuer dismounted smoothly, then lifted her down as if she weighed nothing. His face, now visible beneath his wide-brimmed hat, was handsome in a rugged way, tanned skin, strong jaw covered in stubble, and those remarkable blue eyes. "Vincent O'Malley," he introduced himself, removing his hat briefly. "Most folks just call me Vince." "Hannah Miller," she managed through chattering teeth. Thank you. I would have died." He nodded once, replacing his hat. "What in God's name possessed you to cross there? The spring melt makes this stretch of river deadly. Your wagon train's camped half a mile upriver, at the proper crossing." Hannah's embarrassment burned through her chill. "I went exploring and thought I'd found a shortcut back. The water looked calmer here." She glanced down at her soaked clothing. "Clearly, I was mistaken." A hint of a smile crossed Vince's face. "Clearly." He turned to his horse, a magnificent chestnut gelding, and retrieved a blanket from his saddlebag. "Here, you'll catch your death otherwise." "Are you with the train?" Hannah asked, wrapping the rough wool around her shoulders. "No, madam, just passing through. I'm headed to Wyoming territory." "So are we," Hannah replied. "My father died 2 months ago in Independence. I'm traveling with my younger brother to meet our uncle in Jackson Hole." Vince's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry about your father." "Thank you." Hannah looked toward the distant wagons. "I should get back before my brother worries himself sick. He's only 16. "I'll take you," Vince said, helping her onto his horse before mounting behind her. The solid warmth of his chest against her back made Hannah suddenly conscious of their proximity. As they rode, Hannah learned that Vince was a former cavalry scout heading to Wyoming to start a ranch of his own. He'd saved enough money over the years and had his eye on land near the Tetons. When they reached the wagon train, Hannah's brother Henry rushed to her, his young face creased with worry. "Hannah, where have you been? You're soaked." "I had an unfortunate encounter with the river," she admitted. "Mr. O'Malley saved my life." The wagon train's leader, Mr. Dawson, insisted Vince stay for supper. Though he initially declined, his eyes met Hannah's, and something in her gaze must have convinced him to accept. That evening, as they sat around the campfire, Hannah watched Vince speaking with the men. There was something different about him, a quiet confidence that set him apart. When he caught her staring, she quickly looked away, a blush warming her cheeks. Later, as Vince prepared to leave, Hannah approached him. "Where will you camp tonight? I saw a good spot about a mile west. I prefer to travel alone. The wagon train leaves at dawn, she said, unsure why she was telling him this. We could use an experienced scout. Vince studied her face in the firelight. Is that what the wagon master said? Or what you're saying? Hannah straightened her shoulders. Both, perhaps. Mr. Dawson mentioned it, and I would feel safer knowing you were with us. Something shifted in his expression. I'll think on it. He mounted his horse with easy grace. Good night, Miss Miller. Try to stay out of rivers. When Hannah woke the next morning, the first thing she saw was Vince's tall figure talking with Mr. Dawson. Something fluttered in her chest, something dangerous and thrilling. She told herself it was merely gratitude, but the way her heart raced when he tipped his hat in greeting suggested otherwise. By the following week, Vince had become an integral part of the wagon train. His knowledge of the trail and potential dangers was invaluable, and he rode ahead each day to scout the route. Hannah found herself watching for his return each evening, her eyes scanning the horizon for his distinctive silhouette. One evening, as Hannah cooked dinner for herself and Henry, Vince approached their wagon. Miss Miller, I was wondering if I might join you for supper. Henry grinned mischievously. Hannah's been hoping you would. She made extra. Henry, Hannah hissed, mortified, but Vince only smiled. Is that so? He asked, his eyes meeting hers. I simply thought you might appreciate a home-cooked meal after all you've done for the train, Hannah replied, attempting dignity despite her flushed cheeks. As they ate, Hannah was surprised by how comfortable the conversation flowed. Vince shared stories of his time as a cavalry scout, and Hannah told him about her father's mercantile business in St. Louis, which they'd sold after his death. What about your mother? Vince asked. She died when I was 12. Consumption, Hannah replied softly. It's been just Father, Henry, and me since then. Vince nodded. I lost my parents in a cholera outbreak when I was 18. I know something of that kind of loss. Hannah studied him, realizing he understood more than most the weight she carried. Is that why you joined the cavalry? Partly. Had nowhere else to go, and I needed to earn a living. He hesitated. But I've always wanted land of my own, a place where I answer to no one but myself. And now you'll have it, Hannah said. God willing. He glanced at Henry, who was whittling a piece of wood. What will you do in Jackson Hole? Our uncle owns a general store. He's offered Henry an apprenticeship. Hannah's hands twisted in her lap. I suppose I'll help there too until you marry? Vince finished when she trailed off. Hannah looked away. That was my father's hope. He worried about me being a burden to Henry once he's established. I can't imagine you being a burden to anyone, Miss Miller. Their eyes met, and Hannah felt a jolt of awareness pass between them. She quickly changed the subject. How much farther to Fort Hall? 3 weeks, if the weather holds. Vince leaned back. The worst stretch of river crossings is behind us now. Later that night, as Hannah lay in her wagon listening to Henry's soft snores, she found herself replaying her conversation with Vince. There was something about him that made her feel both unsettled and completely at ease, a contradiction that kept her awake far longer than it should have. The next 2 weeks brought the wagon train across vast prairies dotted with wildflowers. Hannah found reasons to speak with Vince daily, asking about the trail ahead, discussing the provisions, or simply sharing a cup of coffee at the morning fire. She told herself she was being friendly to someone who'd saved her life, nothing more. But when Vince didn't return from his scouting one evening, Hannah's anxiety revealed the truth she'd been avoiding. She cared for him far more than she should. He's fine, Henry assured her as she paced by their wagon. Probably just found something worth investigating. It's nearly dark, Hannah replied, scanning the horizon again. He's never this late. Mr. Dawson approached, his weathered face concerned. No sign of O'Malley yet? Hannah shook her head, fear tightening around her heart. "If he's not back by morning, I'll send out a search party," Dawson promised. Hannah barely slept that night, rising before dawn to watch the eastern horizon. The sky had just begun to lighten when she spotted a rider approaching. Relief flooded through her as she recognized Vince's silhouette, but it quickly turned to alarm when she realized he was slumped forward in the saddle. She ran toward him, reaching his horse just as he nearly fell from the saddle. His face was pale beneath his tan, and blood had soaked through his shirt at the shoulder. "Vince?" she gasped, helping him down. "What happened?" "Ran into some trouble," he managed, grimacing. "Comancheros. They didn't appreciate me stumbling across their camp." Hannah helped him to her wagon, calling for Mr. Dawson. "He's been shot." Within minutes, Mrs. Dawson, who served as the train's healer, was examining Vince's wound. "Bullet went clean through," she declared. "He's lost blood, but with proper care he should recover." Hannah insisted on nursing him herself. "I've helped with wounded men before, when father was ill." For 3 days, Vince drifted in and out of consciousness, fever gripping him as infection set in. Hannah barely left his side, bathing his forehead with cool water and changing his bandages. When he thrashed in delirium, she held his hand and spoke soothingly until he calmed. On the 4th day, his fever broke. Hannah had fallen asleep beside his makeshift bed when he opened his eyes. "You're still here," he murmured, his voice rough. Hannah startled awake. "You're awake. How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by a buffalo." He attempted to sit up but winced, falling back. "How long?" "4 days." Hannah offered him water, which he drank greedily. "You had us worried." "Us? Or you?" There was something vulnerable in his question that made Hannah's heart skip. "Both," she admitted softly. "I was afraid you might not come back." Vince's hand found hers. "I promised to get you and your brother to Wyoming safely. I don't break my promises." Hannah smiled, squeezing his fingers. "Rest now. The wagon train has stopped to give you time to recover." As Vince regained his strength over the next week, something shifted between them. The formal Miss Miller became Hannah when others weren't listening. Their conversations grew deeper, more personal. Hannah found herself sharing dreams she'd never voiced aloud of someday having her own home, filled with children and laughter. "What about you?" she asked one evening as they sat by the fire, the rest of the camp already settled for the night. "Is it just land you want, or something more?" Vince stared into the flames. "For a long time, the land was enough. A place that was mine, that no one could take from me." He paused. "But lately, I've been thinking there's not much point in having land without someone to share it with." Hannah's heart thundered in her chest. Someone, his eyes met hers across the fire. Someone who isn't afraid of hard work. Someone who sees beauty in wild places. Someone brave enough to face whatever comes. Before Hannah could respond, a shout came from the edge of camp. "Riders coming!" Vince was on his feet instantly, wincing slightly at the sudden movement. "Stay here," he ordered, retrieving his rifle from beside their fire. The riders turned out to be a military patrol from Fort Hall, bringing news that a band of Comancheros had been raiding settlements and wagon trains in the area. Hannah watched as Vince spoke with the soldiers, his expression grim. He was still recovering, yet he stood tall and strong, taking charge of the situation. Later that night, Vince announced that the train would change course slightly, taking a less direct but safer route to Fort Hall. "We'll add 3 days to our journey, but better that than risk an encounter with raiders. Is your shoulder up to the extra riding?" Hannah asked quietly as the others dispersed. Vince flexed his arm carefully. "It's healing well, thanks to you. I only changed bandages. Your own strength did the rest." His hand brushed hers, the touch sending warmth up her arm. "We make a good team, Hannah Miller." The changed route took them through more difficult terrain, rocky hills, and narrow valleys that slowed their progress. Vince pushed himself hard, scouting ahead despite his injury and helping when wagons became stuck. Hannah watched him with growing admiration and concern, knowing he was taxing his recovery. One evening, as they made camp in a sheltered valley, Hannah found Vince sitting alone on a large boulder, staring at the sunset. His face was drawn with fatigue, and he held his injured shoulder stiffly. "You're overdoing it," she said, climbing up to sit beside him. "Someone has to keep this train moving." His voice was tight with pain. Hannah reached into her pocket and produced a small tin. "Mrs. Dawson made this salve for your shoulder. She said to rub it in twice daily." Vince looked at the tin, then back at her. "I can't reach it properly. I could help," Hannah offered, suddenly shy. "If you'd allow it." After a moment's hesitation, Vince nodded. He unbuttoned his shirt just enough to expose his injured shoulder. Hannah's fingers trembled slightly as she scooped out some of the pungent salve and began to gently massage it into his skin. The wound was healing well, but the surrounding muscles were knotted with tension. "You carry too much," she murmured, working the salve into a particularly tight muscle. "You can't protect everyone alone." Vince's eyes closed briefly. "It's what I do. It's who I am." "And who takes care of you?" Hannah asked softly. His eyes opened, meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Until now, no one." The air between them charged with unspoken feelings. For one breathless moment, Hannah thought he might kiss her, but then shouts from the camp broke the spell. A wagon axle had broken, requiring immediate attention. Vince buttoned his shirt quickly. "Thank you, Hannah," he said, his voice husky, "for the salve." 2 days later, they reached Fort Hall. The settlement bustled with activity: soldiers, traders, settlers, and Native Americans all conducting business. For Hannah, who had spent weeks seeing only the same faces of their wagon train, it was overwhelming. While the wagons restocked supplies, Hannah wandered the small trading post, marveling at the variety of goods. She was examining a bolt of blue calico when she sensed someone behind her. "That color would suit you," Vince said, his voice closer than she expected. Hannah turned, finding him just inches away. "I was just looking. We need to save our money for essentials." Vince's eyes held hers. "Sometimes beauty is essential too." Before Hannah could respond, a commotion erupted outside. They rushed out to find a group of soldiers escorting prisoners into the fort the Comancheros Vince had encountered. "Those are the men who shot you," Hannah realized, watching as the raiders were led past. Vince nodded grimly. "Good to see them caught. The trail ahead will be safer now." That evening, as the wagon train celebrated their safe arrival at the fort with music and dancing, Hannah found herself swept into the festivities. Several young soldiers asked her to dance, and she accepted, enjoying the rare opportunity for lighthearted fun. But her eyes kept searching for Vince. She finally spotted him leaning against a post, watching the dancing with an unreadable expression. When their eyes met across the crowded space, something in his gaze made her excuse herself from her current partner. "You're not dancing," she said, approaching Vince. "I've never been much for dancing," he replied, though his eyes followed the movements of the couples. "Never, or just not tonight?" Hannah asked, boldness rising in her that she barely recognized. Vince studied her face. "Are you asking me to dance, Hannah Miller?" "I believe I am Vincent O'Malley." A slow smile spread across his face as he pushed away from the post. "Then I accept." His hand at her waist was firm but gentle as he led her into the dance. For a man who claimed not to dance, he moved with surprising grace. Hannah was acutely aware of the whispers and glances from others in the wagon train, but she couldn't bring herself to care. "People are talking," she murmured as they turned. "Let them," Vince replied, his hand tightening slightly at her waist. Unless it troubles you? No, Hannah admitted. It doesn't. As the music slowed, their steps brought them closer together. Hannah, Vince said quietly, I've been thinking about what comes after Wyoming. Her heart quickened. Have you? I have land waiting but no home built yet. It will be a hard first year. Lonely too. Hannah gathered her courage. It doesn't have to be lonely. Vince's steps faltered briefly. What are you saying? I'm saying that perhaps Hannah began, but was interrupted by Henry rushing up to them. Hannah, Mr. Dawson says we're leaving at first light. We need to get our supplies packed. The moment broken, Hannah stepped back from Vince. I should go help. Vince nodded, his expression unreadable again. We'll talk tomorrow. But the next day brought chaos as the wagon train prepared to depart. Hannah barely saw Vince, who was busy conferring with Mr. Dawson about the trail ahead. By the time they left Fort Hall, they still hadn't had their conversation. The terrain grew more challenging as they continued west steep hills, thick forests, and treacherous mountain passes. The weather, too, became unpredictable, with sudden thunderstorms drenching the travelers and turning trails to mud. During one such storm, Hannah's wagon became stuck in a muddy section of trail. She and Henry struggled to free the wheels, but their efforts only seemed to sink them deeper. Through the curtain of rain, Hannah spotted Vince riding toward them. Without a word, he dismounted and began helping, his strong shoulders straining as he heaved against the wagon. Other men from the train joined them, and together they finally freed the vehicle. Vince was soaked to the skin, mud covering his clothes. Get inside, he told Hannah and Henry. I'll lead your oxen through the worst of it. Hannah grabbed his arm. You'll catch your death out here. Something flickered in his eyes, amusement, perhaps, or tenderness. Not while you're still holding my hand, he said softly, echoing his words from the river. Hannah blushed, realizing she was indeed gripping his hand tightly. She released him reluctantly. Be careful. That night, Hannah brought Vince a plate of hot food where he sat by a sputtering fire, still damp from the day's exertions. You saved us again today, she said, sitting beside him. Just doing my job, he replied, though his eyes told a different story. Hannah, about what we started to discuss at Fort Hall. There you are. Mr. Dawson's voice interrupted them as he approached their fire. O'Malley, I need to speak with you about tomorrow's route. Vince's jaw tightened in frustration, but he nodded. Of course. He gave Hannah an apologetic look before following Dawson. The next morning dawned clear and bright. As the wagon train prepared to move out, Vince approached Hannah's wagon. Ride with me today, he said, his expression determined. There's something I want to show you. Hannah hesitated. What about the wagon? Henry can drive it. He's more than capable. Vince extended his hand. Please. Heart racing, Hannah took his hand and allowed him to help her onto his horse. They rode ahead of the wagon train, following a narrow trail through pine forests. The scent of the trees and the warmth of Vince's body against hers made Hannah lightheaded with happiness. After an hour's ride, they emerged onto a high meadow overlooking a valley of breathtaking beauty. Snow-capped mountains rose in the distance, and a winding river glinted in the sun. It's magnificent, Hannah breathed as Vince helped her dismount. This is it, he said, his voice quiet but intense. This is where my land will be. In that valley by the river. Hannah stared at the vista, trying to imagine a home there, a cabin with smoke curling from the chimney, fields of crops, perhaps cattle grazing on the hillsides. It's perfect, Vince. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. It could be, with the right person sharing it. His blue eyes searched hers. I'm not a wealthy man, Hannah. I can't offer you fine dresses or an easy life. But I can promise you this, I'll work every day to build something good here. Something that could grow into a legacy for our children. Hannah's heart soared at the word our. Vince, are you asking? I'm asking you to marry me, he said plainly. I know it's sudden. I know we've only known each other a short time. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Tears filled Hannah's eyes. People will say it's too fast. That we barely know each other. Do you feel like you barely know me? Vince asked, his thumbs gently brushing her knuckles. Hannah shook her head. No. Somehow I feel like I've known you always. Then what does it matter what others say? His hands tightened on hers. Hannah Miller, I love you. I want to build a life with you. Will you have me? Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Vince, I will marry you. His face transformed with joy as he pulled her into his arms. When his lips found hers, Hannah felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. The kiss was tender at first, then deepened with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally broke apart, Vince rested his forehead against hers. We'll tell your brother first, he murmured. Get his blessing. Hannah nodded, too overwhelmed for words. They stood together on the hillside for a long moment, looking out over the land that would be their future home. The ride back to the wagon train was filled with plans and dreams. Hannah would finish the journey to her uncle's in Jackson Hole while Vince staked his claim and began building their cabin. By spring, they would marry. Henry's reaction to their news was a mixture of surprise and delight. I knew it, he crowed. I knew you two would end up together. The rest of the wagon train received the announcement with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Some congratulated them warmly, while others whispered about the hasty nature of the engagement. Hannah found she didn't care about the gossip. The certainty in her heart left no room for doubt. As the wagon train continued westward, Hannah and Vince's bond deepened. They spent every possible moment together, learning the small details that made up each other's lives. Hannah discovered that Vince had a surprising talent for whittling, creating delicate wooden animals in the evenings by the fire. Vince learned that Hannah could recite Shakespeare from memory, a legacy of her father's love of literature. The journey was not without challenges. A week before they were due to reach Jackson Hole, one of the wagon train scouts reported signs of hostiles in the area. Tension gripped the travelers as Vince and Mr. Dawson organized extra guards. That night, Hannah found Vince checking his rifle, his expression grave. How dangerous is it? She asked, sitting beside him. Could be nothing. Could be trouble. He set the rifle down and took her hand. I need you to promise me something, Hannah. If anything happens to me, don't, she interrupted, fear lancing through her. Don't even say such things. Vince's eyes were serious. Listen to me. If something happens, I want you to go on to your uncle's as planned. Get established there. The deed to my land is in my saddlebag. It would be yours. You could sell it or... He hesitated. Or what? Hannah whispered. Or find someone to help you work it. The words clearly cost him. I want you to have a good life, Hannah. With or without me. Hannah gripped his hands fiercely. There is no good life for me without you, Vincent O'Malley. So you make sure you stay alive. His smile was tender as he raised her hands to his lips. Yes, madam. 3 tense days passed without incident. On the 4th morning, as dawn broke over the mountains, a warning shot from one of the guards sent the camp into chaos. Riders were approaching fast. Vince pushed Hannah toward her wagon. Stay down, he ordered, his voice hard with urgency. Don't come out until I call for you. Heart pounding, Hannah obeyed, pulling Henry down with her as gunfire erupted outside. The minutes stretched like hours as she listened to shouts and the thunder of hooves. When silence finally fell, she was afraid to hope. Hannah! Vince's voice called, and she nearly sobbed with relief. It's safe now. She emerged to find not the expected attack, but a troop of cavalry soldiers who had mistaken the wagon train for another group they'd been tracking. The shots had been a warning, answered in kind by the wagon train's guards. Vince stood talking with the cavalry captain, his posture relaxed now. When he saw Hannah, he excused himself and walked to her side. "False alarm," he explained. "The army's been chasing a band of deserters turned outlaws. They thought we might be them." Hannah sagged against him in relief. I was afraid." His arms went around her, solid and reassuring. "I'm not that easy to get rid of." The remainder of the journey passed without incident. As they approached Jackson Hole, Hannah's emotions were conflicted: joy at reaching their destination safely, sorrow at the impending separation from Vince, and nervous anticipation about meeting her uncle after so many years. The settlement was larger than she'd expected, nestled in a beautiful valley surrounded by towering mountains. Uncle James's general store stood prominently on the main street, with living quarters above. As their wagon pulled up in front of the store, a tall man with graying hair emerged. "Hannah? Henry? My God, you've grown so much." Hannah found herself enveloped in a warm embrace. Her uncle's eyes were kind, his smile genuine as he welcomed them. Vince stood back, allowing the family their reunion, but James Miller's sharp eyes soon noticed him. "And who's this?" he asked, extending his hand. "Vincent O'Malley." Vince introduced himself, shaking James's hand firmly. "I've been helping guide the wagon train." "He's also Hannah's fiancé," Henry added with a grin. James's eyebrows shot up. "Is that so? Well, Mr. O'Malley, it seems we have much to discuss. Won't you come inside?" The next few hours were spent explaining their journey and their plans. To Hannah's relief, her uncle seemed to approve of Vince, especially after hearing how he had saved her life. "My land is about 2 days' ride from here," Vince explained. "I'll need to build a cabin before winter sets in. Then I'll return for Hannah in the spring." 2 days isn't so far," James mused. "I suppose you could visit on occasion, even before spring." Hannah's heart lightened at this suggestion. The thought of months without seeing Vince had been weighing on her. That evening, as the sunset painted the mountains gold, Vince and Hannah walked through the small town. Their time together was drawing to a close, and both felt the weight of the coming separation. "I'll start back tomorrow," Vince said, his hand warm around hers. "The sooner I begin building, the sooner I can come back for you." Hannah nodded, fighting tears. "I'll help Uncle James in the store. Save every penny I can for our home." Vince stopped walking and turned to face her. "I've been thinking about that. Our wedding." "Yes." Hannah's pulse quickened at the seriousness in his tone. "What if we didn't wait until spring?" His blue eyes held hers intently. "What if we married now before I leave? You could stay with your uncle while I build the cabin, but we'd already be husband and wife." Hannah's breath caught. "Now? But we don't have anything prepared. No dress, no. We have what matters." Vince interrupted gently. "We have each other. We have your family's blessing. The rest is just details." As Hannah considered his words, she realized he was right. The thought of him leaving tomorrow was painful enough. The thought of him leaving without the bond of marriage between them was unbearable. "Yes," she whispered. "Let's marry now." The next morning, in the small church at the edge of town, Hannah Miller became Hannah O'Malley in a simple ceremony witnessed by her brother, uncle, and a few townspeople who had quickly become friends. Her dress was borrowed from a neighbor, her bouquet gathered from wildflowers growing beside the church. When Vince kissed her as his wife for the first time, Hannah knew that despite the unconventional speed of their courtship, this was right. This was where she belonged. Their wedding night was spent in a small room at the town's only hotel, a luxury Vince insisted upon despite its cost. His tenderness as he introduced Hannah to the intimacy of marriage confirmed what her heart already knew. She had found a rare and precious love. Morning came too quickly, bringing with it the reality of their temporary separation. Vince held her close as dawn broke, his voice rough with emotion. "It won't be long, 2 months at most, and I'll have a home ready for you." "I'll be waiting," Hannah promised, memorizing the feeling of his arms around her. Be careful, Vince. Their farewell at the edge of town was witnessed by Henry and Uncle James, who tactfully kept their distance. Vince kissed Hannah one last time, then mounted his horse. I love you, Hannah O'Malley. And I love you, she replied, forcing a smile through her tears. Now go build our home. The weeks that followed were filled with activity as Hannah settled into life in Jackson Hole. She helped her uncle in the store, quickly learning the business and enjoying the interaction with customers. In the evenings, she sewed items for her new home: curtains, quilts, and linens that would transform a simple cabin into a place of comfort. Henry thrived in his apprenticeship, showing a natural aptitude for trade that pleased their uncle immensely. Hannah watched her brother grow more confident each day, grateful that they had found such a welcoming home. True to his word, Vince returned to town every 2 weeks, staying for a day or two before returning to his work. Each visit showed the toll of hard labor on his body-calloused hands, new lines of fatigue around his eyes, but also the satisfaction of creating something lasting. The cabin has 4 rooms, he told Hannah during one visit, sketching the layout on a piece of paper. A main room with a fireplace, our bedroom, a small room for guests or perhaps someday a nursery, and a lean-to kitchen. Hannah blushed at the mention of a nursery, though the thought filled her with quiet joy. It sounds perfect. As autumn painted the mountains in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, Vince arrived in town with news. It's ready, he announced, his face alight with pride. Our home is ready. Hannah's heart soared. Truly? We can go now. As soon as you're packed. His smile faltered slightly. It's not fancy, Hannah. It's solid and warm, but there are no fine furnishings yet. That will come with time. I don't need fine things, Hannah assured him. I just need you, and a place that's ours. 2 days later, after tearful farewells to her brother and uncle, Hannah rode beside Vince toward their new home. The journey took them through spectacular mountain scenery, across meadows still green despite the approaching winter, and along the banks of a clear, rushing river. When they crested a final hill, Hannah gasped. Below them lay the valley Vince had shown her months before, but now a cabin stood near the river, smoke curling invitingly from its chimney. A small corral held several horses, and the beginnings of a barn stood nearby. Welcome home, Mrs. O'Malley, Vince said softly. Tears filled Hannah's eyes as she took in the scene. It wasn't grand or imposing, but it was there's a beginning, built with Vince's own hands from his dreams and determination. As they rode closer, Hannah noticed details that touched her deeply: window boxes waiting for spring flowers, a porch swing hanging from sturdy beams, a flat stone path leading to the door. Vince had thought of everything. He helped her down from her horse, then surprised her by sweeping her into his arms. Tradition says I should carry you over the threshold, he explained, carrying her up the steps. Inside, the cabin was simple but welcoming. A fire burned in the stone fireplace, casting warm light over the main room. A sturdy table with chairs stood to one side, while a comfortable-looking settee faced the hearth. Braided rugs softened the wooden floors, and curtains clearly purchased rather than homemade hung at the windows. Vince, it's beautiful, Hannah breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. It will get better, he promised. Each year we'll add something new, make it more comfortable. Hannah wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his chest. It's already perfect because you're here. That night, as they lay together in their own bed for the first time, Hannah felt a contentment she had never known before. The journey that had begun with terror in a flooding river had led her to this moment, safe in the arms of a man who loved her, in a home they would fill with life and laughter. What are you thinking? Vince murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. I'm thinking about the day we met, she replied. How afraid I was in that river. How certain I was that I would drown. His arms tightened around her. I still remember how you looked so fierce even in your fear, fighting the current with everything you had. Hannah smiled in the darkness. And then you came, like something from a dream, when I told you you'd drown. Not while you're still holding my hand, Vince finished. I meant it then and I mean it now, Hannah. Whatever currents life throws at us, we'll face them together. Hannah's hand found his in the darkness, their fingers intertwining. Together, she agreed softly. The months that followed brought challenges and joys as they built their life together. Winter arrived with heavy snows that isolated their valley for weeks at a time. They learned each other's habits and moods, Vince's preference for early mornings, Hannah's love of reading by the fire in the evenings. They argued occasionally, learning how to bend without breaking, how to compromise and forgive. Spring brought new life to the valley, wildflowers carpeting the meadows, new foals in the corral, and seedlings pushing through the soil in Hannah's carefully tended garden. It also brought news that filled their home with excitement. Hannah was expecting their first child. A baby? Vince whispered, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. Our baby. The wonder in his eyes made Hannah love him even more. This strong, capable man who had faced dangers without flinching was rendered speechless by the miracle growing within her. By summer, their small ranch was taking shape. Vince had purchased a small herd of cattle and employed 2 young men from a nearby settlement to help with the increasing work. The barn was completed, and a chicken coop stood beside it, providing fresh eggs each morning. Hannah's belly grew along with their prosperity, and Vince's protectiveness grew with it. He insisted she rest more, hired a local girl to help with household chores, and made regular trips to town for supplies and occasional luxuries: peppermint candy, fabric for baby clothes, a rocking chair for the nursery. In late autumn, as the mountains once again blazed with color, Hannah gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth James O'Malley, named for Hannah's mother and uncle. Vince's hands, so sure and steady in every crisis, trembled as he held his tiny daughter for the first time. She's perfect, he whispered, awe written across his features. Just like her mother. Hannah watched them, her heart so full it ached. The journey that had brought her to this moment from the flooded river, where she'd nearly lost her life, to this cabin filled with love, seemed like both a miracle and the most natural progression in the world. As winter returned to their valley, bringing with it the quiet isolation they had come to cherish, Hannah often thought about how quickly life could change. One moment of courage, Vince riding into the river to save a stranger, had altered both their destinies forever. On a snowy evening 5 years later, as Hannah watched Vince teaching their young daughter to dance while their 3-year-old son clapped delightedly from his seat by the fire, she marveled at how full their lives had become. The cabin had expanded, 2 more rooms added as their family grew. The ranch prospered, providing not just survival but comfort and security. Uncle James and Henry visited regularly, the journey between Jackson Hole and the ranch a well-traveled path now. Henry, at 21, had become a partner in their uncle's store and was courting a local girl. Life had been kind to the Millers and the O'Malleys. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Hannah and Vince stood on their porch watching snowflakes drift down in the moonlight. His arm around her shoulders kept her warm against the winter chill. Happy? Vince asked, the word creating a puff of white in the cold air. Hannah leaned into his embrace. Completely. You've given me everything I ever wanted, Vince. A home, a family, a love that grows stronger every day. He turned her to face him, his blue eyes as captivating now as they had been that day by the river. You're the one who gave me everything, Hannah. Before you, I had plans but no purpose. Land but no home. His hand cupped her cheek tenderly. You were the missing piece. As his lips met hers in a kiss that held both the passion of their youth and the deeper connection forged through years together, Hannah thought again of that day in the river, of reaching out in desperation and finding not just rescue but her future. Not while you're still holding my hand, he had promised, and in the years since, through challenges and triumphs alike, he had kept that promise. Whatever currents life brought their way, they faced them together, hand in hand, hearts beating as one. And in that moment, with the snow falling around them and their children sleeping safely inside the home they had built together, Hannah knew with absolute certainty that some loves truly were strong enough to overcome any obstacle, even the wild, unpredictable currents of life itself.